Hello there, it's Silver. This is Astral Ascent. So this is a roguelite platformer, and it's something that's been in early access for quite a while now, and I've actually played it on and off for like the entirety of its early access campaign, and I've watched it grow and change into its current form, and now that its huge 1.0 release update is out and the game is officially out of early access, I figured it would be the perfect time to finally take a look at it. And I can say for sure, just looking back through all the various iterations the game has gone through in the last while that it's been on EA, it has really changed a lot for the better. Like, it was a solid game at first, but it was more of like a proof of concept kind of like what it wanted to be, and it's really formed into this really well-rounded, interesting experience, and it's been a fun time to actually watch it go through all of its various forms until it has finally released. So this is a game that is very heavily combat focused, and pretty much everything you're going to be doing is going to involve combat in some form. So you choose a character, you'll only start with just the two initial characters, but you will unlock two others as you go through the game. I believe the main way you do it is by reaching certain bosses at like specific thresholds throughout a run. And you do have this really nice, chill sort of hub area that you'll start a run at. It's a safe zone where you can choose your character and visit various NPCs, and these NPCs will have different things to say to different characters to sort of, flesh out their backstories a little bit, as well as many of them having different unlocks and stuff. There's a ton of stuff to unlock in this game, and although that doesn't mean you start with very little variety, you actually start with quite a bit. It's just that there's a lot more that you can find as you progress through the game. Variety, I think, is just a really good word to describe this game in general. As it's gotten closer and closer to its 1.0 release, it's really focused on fleshing out a lot of its mechanics with a lot of variety. So there's a huge amount of run variety in this game in terms of all the various things that you can find and come up against. So once you start a run, you will end up in the first area, and the zones do go in a specific progression. It's not like randomized, you have a certain order that you go in. But the first thing you'll encounter is a spell choice, because this game has a lot of different spells, and every character has a sort of generic pool of spells that everyone can pull from, but they also have a character-specific pool that only that character can find. So there's a ton of different spells for you to find and equip, and you'll always have 4 of them at any given time. Every character will start with one basic starter spell in each slot, the same one in each of the 4 slots, and you can replace them with ones you find however you'd like. Every character also has a basic attack combo that is different for each person, and also something called a signature spell, which is sort of like their ult. It's some sort of large, big ability that they can use that's usually on a relatively long cooldown that sort of defines their character. So after you're given this initial spell choice, you'll also be given something called a prowess tree to look at. And this, you'll only have one choice to make at first, but as you go through a run, you'll get more and more. Basically, you have these 8 different slots that you can fill with upgrades, and you'll only start with one slot on the left. The 4 slots on the left are upgrades to your signature spell, and the 4 slots on the right are upgrades to your basic attack. And at level 1, where you'll start, you'll simply have just the one signature spell upgrade slot available, but every time you level up, it'll unlock alternating each time between the 2 different kinds of slots, and you can only find this prowess tree, though, at the beginning of each area, so you won't be able to like instantly put a point into this every time you level. You'll have to wait until the beginning of each zone. And these can be all sorts of really powerful things, like summoning specific elemental effects, or upping your crit chance, or reducing the cooldown on your spell, or all sorts of different stuff, but they will overall help to form a sort of powerful build, and you're encouraged to choose from different ones in order to just come up with some synergizing effects. And then after that, it'll be off into the actual level proper, and at first you'll be given a choice between 2 to 3 different kinds of rooms that you could possibly go in, and you simply choose the one that seems the best to you. And the 2 main types of rooms that you're going to find most often are combat rooms and exploration rooms. And combat rooms are exactly what they sound like. They lock you into a small arena and spawn waves of enemies. And exploration rooms are basically the exact opposite. They're a much longer series of corridors and rooms and stuff that are all connected to each other, having various different enemy spawns throughout them, and of course other stuff for you to find. And when you select a room, you'll be given what type of room it is. You'll also be given what reward you'll get at the end of the room, and it'll also have a star rating that determines its difficulty. But the interesting thing about the stars is that they aren't just like an intangible difficulty rating, they're also an actual currency. So every time you choose a room, you get that number of stars as a currency that you can spend later on at the end of each level. So you're sort of encouraged to go for the higher difficulty ones if you think you can handle it, because they'll give you more stars as a result. The combat rooms tend to give you keys as a reward, and while doing the exploration rooms, you'll come across these big crystalline treasure chests called astral chests, and you can spend keys to unlock these. And usually they have two different rewards. Actually, they always have two different rewards, one that costs 3 keys and one that costs 5 keys. And the main types of rewards you'll find are feathers or altars. And feathers upgrade the level of whatever spell you use them on, and that gives you a pretty significant power increase for that spell. So a 3-key reward feather will be a +1 level, and a 5-key reward feather will be a +2 level. And the altars have 3 different stats that can be improved, just incremented slightly, like 3% extra armor or 5% extra strength and things like that. And on a 3-key reward, it'll be a +1 altar, so you'll be able to choose one of the 3 options. And for the 5-key reward, it'll be a +2 altar, so you can select 2 of the 3 options. Combat is definitely the heart of the game, and it's a really fun combat system. So the first thing is that you are really acrobatic and mobile in this game. You have a double jump by default. You also have a dash that can be used on the ground or in the air, and it does have pretty generous immunity frames. And also when you hit something in midair, it refreshes your double jump, and you can even dash multiple times as well. So if there are a bunch of enemies on screen, you can actually stay in the air pretty much indefinitely as long as you keep accurately hitting them. And this will become more and more important as you go through each zone, because of course each one has much more aggressive and difficult monsters with several different attack patterns and all sorts of other things to look at. And by the 3rd and 4th area, the game gets extremely hectic, and there's just a load of crap on the screen at all times, and you are constantly dashing and jumping around the place. You have to be really on the ball. This game gets very hard, but it is also really satisfying to actually execute a combat really well and do an entire room without taking damage. It's just a really skillful combat system that's fun to use. You have a limited amount of mana, and each of your spells costs a certain amount of mana to cast, and you simply regenerate mana by doing basic attacks against enemies, so you're encouraged to be aggressive at all times. And the spells are sort of like in a deck, you could say. Basically, once you cast a spell, it goes to the next slot in line, and the one you just cast gets grayed out, and you can't go back to it at first. You have to cast each spell at least once in order to do a spell refresh that will make them all available again. You can press a button to skip a spell if you want to cast them out of order, but you can't cast each one more than once per refresh. The healing system is kind of interesting as well. You get these green crystal shards from killing enemies very rarely, and you can press the trigger in to consume all of them you have and give yourself a small burst heal, and the more shards you have, the bigger the heal is, and you always consume all of them at once. But if you manage to collect 5 shards without spending them, they become a much larger healing crystal, and that heals you for way more than 4 shards does. It's like over twice the heal. So if ideally you want to save up all 5 of them if you can, and you would only use an incomplete healing crystal if you were in an emergency situation. You'll also constantly be getting these pink quartz shards, and these are sort of like your gold. They are your currency. And at the end of a floor, just before the big boss battle, you'll go to Andromeda's bar, and she will sell you some drinks that increase your stats 4 stars. So this is where you spend all those stars you've been gathering for going from room to room, and they usually cost about 8 stars per drink, and you can just get as many as you want until you run out of stars. You'll also find a shop that allows you to spend those quartz crystals on various things like new spells or gambits, and gambits are modifications to your spells. Every spell has 4 different gambit slots. Usually 2 of them are locked, but you can find gambit unlockers to make those slots available, and these allow you to just modify your spells with extra effects, like maybe they can spawn poisonous slimes, or summon these adorable cat things called yallies, or do a variety of other things. And each spell has a sort of elemental affinity, and if you put gambits that match that affinity into those slots, it'll give you a 10% increase to that spell's power, all the way up to 40%, which will stack with the spell level's increase in power to make them really, really powerful. Speaking of power, there are also a lot of other types of special rooms that you're going to come across, as the game calls them, that do all sorts of different things, and you may want to choose one of these instead of a normal combat or exploration room in order to just help yourself out. And there are all sorts of different ways to become stronger during a run. You've got things like auras. You'll only have 1 aura slot at first, but you can unlock up to 4 eventually. These are passive effects that are usually really strong, and they have rarities. Higher rarities have increased effects that sort of stack on top of each other to become really significant. And there are also astral auras, which sort of glow purple, and they have unique effects to them that tend to be really strong, but they're also very rare to find. You can also get these things called echoes, which represent other NPCs and playable characters coming to help you out in specific scenarios, so they're kind of like summons almost, but they're passive. They're usually really powerful, and they're always worth getting. You can also find all sorts of other different kinds of rooms, like, say, the moon room, which actually hurts you in order to get into it. It takes a lot of your health if you want to use it, but if you have enough to spare and you feel confident that you can, get a good heal afterwards, it allows you to equip a zodiac-themed spell that's extremely powerful. It's basically all the bosses in this game are zodiacs, and you can use some of their signature abilities as spells if you find this room. You can also find stuff like the Forge, which allows you to make specific kinds of spells to choose from, or up the level of all of your equipped spells by 1 each time. And there are some Gambit-themed rooms that give you specific elemental Gambits and stuff so that you can sort of, fine-tune your current list of spells in a specific way. There are also challenge rooms. Every Zodiac has a challenge room that you can sometimes come across, and each Zodiac has a specific kind of challenge. Like Capricorn's is a sort of memory card game. Taurus's involves destroying all these aerial targets without touching the ground a single time. Everyone's got a little bit of a different challenge, but if you're able to complete the challenge, then you will get them as a summon. And you definitely want this if you can manage it, because all of the summons are really powerful and really good. You charge up the summon gauge by just using spells, and once it's full you click in the right stick and you can summon them for whatever it is they do. And one little cool feature of this is if you actually bring a summon to the final boss, they'll have dialogue unique to them. They'll actually talk to the final boss in your place. At the end of each area is, of course, the boss, the room after the bar, and each zone has 3 different possible bosses that you could face, and it will choose one randomly each time, and like I said, they're all Zodiac-themed. Since there are 4 areas, 3 bosses each, that's all 12. The boss fights are really fun, and they get extremely difficult and hectic. They all have a lot of different attack patterns to learn, dodge timings to perfect, and they also sometimes have phase transitions or this sort of blue bar that fills up and causes them to do some sort of completely different attack pattern for a while it's full. It's different for every one of them, but it's usually something really threatening and dangerous you've got to be careful about. Their visual design is all top-notch. They all look really cool. In fact, I would just say in general the game is very pretty. It's got a nice, densely detailed pixel art style, and something about the way the character and boss sprites move, they look kind of like they're rotoscoped. I don't know if they actually are, but they have that appearance, which I think was maybe the point. But yeah, if you're able to beat a boss, then you'll get a big chest as a reward that'll have some experience, some stars, some healing, and a choice of 4 different auras for you to choose, and then you'll go on to the next zone, and you complete this 4 times, and you will end up facing off against the Master, who is Ophiuchus, the 13th zodiac sign, who is extremely ridiculously difficult, and I've only managed to beat him once so far. And then whether you win or lose, you'll end up back in the hub area and you'll unlock various new things. You can unlock new spells for each character to purchase. You can unlock various incremental upgrades to purchase, like extra maximum health, extra maximum mana, extra shard gain, all sorts of things like that. And you will also unlock various achievements and things that will give you the currency that you need to purchase all these unlocks. And you'll also earn a bunch of the currency, which is called sun pieces, every time you finish a run. After you beat Ophiuchus for the first time, you'll also gain this new Path of Destiny unlock system, which gives you these much rarer currencies that can be used for very powerful incremental upgrades that you will amass as you beat bosses and stuff. I should also mention that each of the 4 characters that are currently available are very different from each other. Not only do they have very different signature spells and basic attacks and stuff, but just the way that they play in general and the way that their spell pool works, it gives them sort of a distinct theme. I'm a big fan of Octave and his guns, and a couple of his other really unique skills. He's just fun to use, very fast, very frantic. But also the final character you unlock, she uses like precious stones and gem-themed stuff, and she's very difficult to use correctly, but really enjoyable. I tend to like characters that work like her in games like this, so I just need to play her more to suck less, but yeah, she's really interesting. So overall, my current look at Astral Ascent is that it is a really good roguelite that stands out amongst the crowd just by being such a varied and satisfying experience. I never really feel bad whenever I die in this game. It does get hard, but I've never really felt that it was unfair. And you want to start a new run immediately, right? Because the spells are so fun to use, all the various things that you can find, like the auras and echoes, they make a lot of a difference in a run and can make each run feel quite different. The build that you're creating with each character is very reliant on all sorts of unique things that you'll find along the way, and it makes the game just feel highly varied and interesting to go through. So I'm really glad to see what it has become over its time in the early access system, and now that it's finally released, I can say for sure that they used their time in early access extremely well, like very, very well, to craft the experience into the current state that it is. So I highly recommend this one if you enjoy astral themes like this, if you're just a roguelite fan, or if you just like sort of punishing combat-focused platformers. There's a lot here to love, and the high amount of variety and satisfaction in its very skill-based combat will keep you playing for a long time. So I'll put the link in the description below this video to the Steam store page for Astral Ascent so that you can go and check it out. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.